Again, it wasn't we want to investigate a little bit. And that's the thing that they're doing more. And that was really, I thought,
He almost became one of my relatives.
Where he pushed this idea of like, you should be asking for investigation expenses, but you should
My
think
son
about
and his stepdaughter.
have a thought process about it to say articulate. And that's something I think
Is she still doing good?
making you have to articulate what areas of respect that you I think
You'll have to tell her that Bill's daughter is really doing good. Yeah. Okay, I better get started. Gee, I didn't know I was going to have the great big heavy gavel this morning, but that's kind of nice. It got everybody's attention.
okay, all right.
Convening the Public Safety Task Force meeting. Today is Friday, September 30th, 2016. Before you know it, we'll be into 2017. I want to welcome everybody this morning, and I'd like to go around the table, and I'll start with Mike, and let's just introduce herself. And following going around the table, we'll check to see who's on the phone, who's called in.
Mike Schmidt, Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Commission and staff to this task force.
Bob Herman, Washington County District Attorney, representing the Oregon District Attorneys Association.
Morning, Lane Borg, Metropolitan Public Defenders, Criminal Defense Attorney.
Rick Barron, Circuit Judge, 15th Judicial District.
Jessica Beach, Yamhill County Corrections Manager.
Shane Hoffman, IT Manager, Yamhill County.
John Collins, Circuit Judge, Yamhill County.
Ted Smetana, Community Corrections Director, Yamhill County.
Ross Caldwell, Criminal Justice Commission.
Jackie Winters, State Senator.
John Tichy, Police Advisor.
Jason Myers, Marion County Sheriff. I'm here representing the Oregon State Sheriff's Association.
Jay Dixon, Benton County Commissioner, representing the Association of Oregon Counties.
Steve Berger, Director of Community Corrections for Washington County, representing Oregon Association of Community Corrections Directors.
Steve Dole, Crime Victims United of Oregon.
And in our audience, I think we'll start with Smith.
Laura Smith, representing Community Corrections Directors Association and Juvenile Department Directors Association.
Jeremiah Stromberg, Department of Corrections.
Karen Joplin, Hood River County Commissioner.
Jamie Hefner, Hood River County Community Corrections Director.
Gail Meyer, Legislative Representative for the Criminal Defense Lawyers Association.
Gary Wood,
Criminal Justice Commission. Madeline Nardo, Criminal Justice Commission.
Ellie Officer, Criminal Justice Commission. Greta Lowry, Deputy District Attorney, Coos County.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the phone?
Representative Williamson was going to call in. I guess she hasn't called in yet, and she has some things posted at the same time.
Well, we're going to start this morning, and just know I hope we stay on schedule this morning, because yours truly is trying to get ready to take a much-needed vacation. So just so you know, so the gavel will be going fast. So I understand, next up is Yamhill County to present the JR program overview.
Ready for us? Okay. Well, good morning. Ted Smetana, Yamhill County. We want to talk to you today about one of our efforts, our JRI efforts in Yamhill County, and it's our pretrial program, pretrial services program. Just to give you a little bit of context, we really started this work back in 2010 or 11. It was kind of born out of a technical assistance grant we received from the National Institute of Corrections called the Evidence-Based Decision-Making Initiative. And that's what kind of got us focused on pretrial and having a desire to implement a risk-based and evidence-based pretrial justice system. We were later supported by a different federal grant, the Bureau of Justice Assistance Local Justice Reinvestment Initiative grant. And through that, we had a whole lot of technical assistance and training. And in addition, that gave us access to a researcher who was able to do a lot of work for us in terms of validation studies and the like. And we'll go into that a little bit more in detail later. Go ahead, Ross. So we have a pretty simple mission in Yamhill County regarding pretrial justice. We have three main goals, three main anchors in terms of how we structure our work. Firstly, go ahead. That's okay. We want to maximize release. And when we say maximize release, what we mean is we want to smartly identify the people who can be safely released, the people that can be managed in the community. These folks still are presumed innocent under the eyes of the law. And if there's no reason to hold them, and holding them can actually be a negative factor in their community functioning, then we want to correctly identify and release those individuals, and also at the same time identify the high-risk people, the dangerous, scary people, and make sure that those folks are contained. So we want to maximize that. We want to maximize court appearance for those folks that we do release. We want to make sure that we use every appropriate way to identify them and monitor them so that they do reappear in court as scheduled. And lastly, but first and foremost, the anchor of everything we do in public safety is to consider always victim and community safety as our first priority. Judge, do you want to talk a little bit?
Yes, I'm John Collins. I was added on to this kind of the last minute, but I wanted to give a little bit of a perspective, especially to this group that I had the honor of being on a couple of years ago, where we had a lot of focus on sentencing reform, and I know that's still a big focus, but I recall even mentioning the very first time I introduced myself on the commission was that I hope at some point we could also look at the pretrial justice issue, because if you look at the decision points in the system, one of our mottos is that every interaction with an alleged offender is an opportunity for harm reduction. And that doesn't just mean to the person, but it means to the community. But it does mean to the person too, because in many of our decisions we can not only avoid harm, we can do harm. And in my view, the two biggest junctures are sentencing and pretrial, the pretrial release decision in specific. So we've focused on that. We're doing our share. We're doing our duty on the reduction of commitments to the Corrections Division. We're one of the green counties below our baseline for commitments to the state, and that's been very much an application of the same principles that we're now applying to the pretrial too. And it allows us to make smarter sentencing decisions. So, like the sentencing decision, there's fiscal considerations too. As everybody here amply knows, it's a big expense to send people to prison. We shouldn't do it unless we need to for a variety of reasons. And the same's true of pretrial, except with a little more due process emphasis, because the people pretrial are, as Ted pointed out, presumed innocent. And by statute and by Constitution, we're required to follow a presumption of release. We're required to release people if we at all possibly, and possibly means safely, and with an assurance of appearance, release people pretrial. So it does have an impact eventually. People that are held pretrial are more likely, if you get two people equally situated, one released, one not, the one that's not released is more likely to be convicted, more likely to be sentenced to a longer term of jail or prison, more likely to lose pro-social influences like jobs and family and child support and other things that are impacted by being incarcerated pre-trial. So that's why we regard this as a big decision point in addition to this sentencing point. I hope this commission will get to a point of considering the pretrial issue that we just couldn't get to when I was on the commission 2 years ago. I always hate to raise this, but I will mention too that in studying this issue, there are successful lawsuits occurring throughout the country for pretrial systems. The ones where they're occurring the most is where they have bail bondsmen, and that's not us. Thank you, legislature and others, for the wisdom of doing that in 1972. But there still are other aspects of our release decisions that implicate violations of equal protection and due process. So that's the least important, in my opinion. I don't want that to be the policy reason for making some changes, but it's something to be aware of as well. So I'm, as a judge, got a big responsibility in sentencing, big responsibility in pretrial release, and I'm glad we're doing something to improve it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think that someone joined us on the phone. Is that Representative Williamson? Oh.
Yes, this is Representative Williamson.
Okay, thank you.
Jessica?
My name is Jessica, and I am the direct lead supervisor for the pretrial unit. Just to explain my role just a little bit, I get to talk to you a little bit more about getting into the weeds of the work that we actually did. One of the first exercises we did was to map our entire pretrial justice system, and this was from the first contact with police in the field, if they get arrested, if they get cited, then going into jail, what's the process that happens in the jail, then going through the court appearances, and we looked at our whole system. And the purpose of that was really to determine where we had gaps locally that we determined we could really focus on and improve upon. Secondly, we adopted a mission, vision, and values. Ted talked about that earlier. We completed 2 local validation studies. This was a huge undertaking for us because we had no pretrial information systems. So we literally created a Excel spreadsheet with 80 data elements that we collected for every single person that was arrested. And I had a student who by hand went through 2 to 3 different information systems to plug in every single space of that Excel. So that's how we validated. So it was a big undertaking for us. We began with the VPRA. We determined that later that the public safety checklist was a better tool for us locally. And that's when we adopted the PSC as our main pretrial risk assessment tool. We do still use the VPRA as a secondary tool if the particular defendant does not have a state ID number. We created a risk-based pretrial release matrix, and basically what this did was it allowed our judge here, provided us, the jail staff, with the authority to release very low risk folks, misdemeanor crimes. And we hadn't had that opportunity before, so folks were able to get booked and released that didn't need to be in jail and could be safely released. We also produced a written release recommendation report. Previously, we did all of this verbally in court, and it actually was a statutory requirement that we provide a written release report, so we're finally in compliance with that. We adopted a second look process. So this is, actually I call it second look or third look or fourth look, but this is the process by which if a dependent remains in jail following the first appearance, the first arraignment, we look at that case again 3 days later, for instance, to see if perhaps any barriers to release have disappeared and perhaps they could be safely released. And we don't stop at second. We look at a third and we look at a fourth later on if that person continues to be incarcerated. And we find generally that there are folks that can be later released. We implemented a court automated notification system. This is pretty exciting for me in particular. This is similar to a dental reminder system, so that you probably receive a text from your dentist reminding me, hey, you have a dental appointment, dental cleaning tomorrow. We implemented something similar, and they're automated notification calls that go out to our defendants 6 days and 2 days prior to their court appearances. And I'll talk about some of the data of that in just a moment. We created a mission and procedural document, and last but not least, we developed and are developing an automated pretrial information system, which is really exciting. And Shane and Ted will talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. Next slide. So just a little bit of data to share with you. This, again, is very exciting. When we began this process, we didn't have very much data. We certainly didn't have this data. One of the first things on the top there is concurrence rate, and our overall concurrence rate is 89%. Basically what this means is this is the rate at which the judge is agreeing with the release recommendation of the pretrial services officer. Our appearance rate for this particular quarter was 2.7%. We see it fluctuate between 4 to 2.7% typically, but we're pretty proud of that appearance rate, and I think that the court automated notification system is
Could I jump in? It's actually 97% appearance rate, a 2.7% fail to appear rate.
Absolutely. Our court automated notification system, so in this particular quarter we made 1,341 calls and had an average success rate of 81%. So we're pretty pleased with that, and that fluctuates between, I'd say, 78 to about 85% on a monthly basis. And our pretrial jail population, we averaged in this quarter around 201, and that provided us with a daily average pretrial population of around 38.8. This is actually on the high end. I looked just today, and we were at around 37, and we've seen it as low as 34 And when we began this project, we were at 45, so that's been a substantial improvement in our pretrial jail population.
If I could jump in on one other thing, I look at who's been in jail for more than 60 days. We use that as a way of measuring the prolonged. A lot of harm can be done just by being in jail for 2 days, but these are the ones that are aged cases, and so we should expect to have people there on serious charges that are serious risk that are staying in jail that long, and in fact, that's the way it worked out. We've reduced that number dramatically by using some of these risk principles. I think we had 17 in custody over 60 days, and every one of them is there for a felony. Almost all of them are a person crime. Nobody's there on misdemeanors. Nobody's there on low risk at that point in time.
Can I ask a question?
So just kind of wrapping. I'm sorry.
Jeff Myers has a question.
I'm just kind of curious. Do you know what the percentage of your pretrial offenders in custody at any given time? What kind of the snapshot is for your jail?
That's the number we're running at about 35, 36, 37%
of the total population.
Of the total jail population?
Yes.
Okay.
We started our baseline. We ran, it's a jail population. It fluctuates every day, but we were averaging really consistently about 45% pretrial. So we've basically dropped 10 percentage points, which I think is a 22% overall reduction.
If I could jump in too, it might be worth noting that we're not driven by an overcrowded jail, so that helps us in a lot of ways. But I mean, that's been a good factor. The other thing I always like to point out, the failure to appear rate, some people look at that 2.7, that's unbelievable. Well, it's 2.7% of the appearances, total scheduled appearances, somebody doesn't appear. It's a little bit different than the measure some people use, where they use the number of defendants that one or more times during the course of their case don't appear. If you do that other number, it gets a little higher. But so if somebody tells you they have a 12% failure to appear rate, that's not necessarily 6 times as bad as ours. It might be because it's measured just a little differently. But we're pretty pleased with this failure.
And in an ideal world, we'd measure it both ways and compare and contrast. But because we're just now implementing a data system, we're deriving these numbers by hand counts. So we're actually paying staff every day to get into the court database and figure out who appeared and who did not appear the day before. So this is kind of an event-based system. If we had more of a name-based failure to appear rate, I think the judge is correct. We'd probably see it higher than 2.7%.
I have one more quick question.
Sure.
So those that you're doing preventative detention on, are you setting bail, and then how do you set that criteria for the dollar amount? Because that seems to be an issue nationwide, that in some cases bail set, it's the dangerous, the high-risk offender, the bail set, they bail out. I think in Washington, the Lakeview police officers that were killed, that person was in on $200,000 bail. They didn't think that individual would get bailed out. He bailed out and killed those police officers. So how are you kind of working through that process?
Yeah, just one of the most tragic memories I have in my career is somebody who was released on $220,000 bail, especially a while back when that was a lot of money. His father just happened to come into a workers' comp award and posted bail, and he killed the victim in the case. It was a terrible case. So there are those terrible cases. I think it's always important, though, not to regard that as let that drive policy. But to answer your question, I think what we do is set bail at a high amount, usually. Sometimes there are statutory requirements of high bail, as you know. For example, on Measure 11 offenses, it has to be at least $50,000. Although you can constitutionally find that is a violation of the Constitution, and then set lower bail or even a conditional or recognizance release on a Measure 11 offense, but it candidly isn't done a lot. Oregon does have a preventive detention statute that allows a person to be held without bail. It only applies to violent felonies, and there has to be clear and convincing evidence that they're danger to the community or risk of flight. So the simplest answer to your question is to keep people in, we set high bail. And that practice is one of the practices that's the target of lawsuits across the country. And it also points out, as you did earlier, that if you got somebody that's a major heroin dealer, and they can post that cost of doing business and then take off. And we've had a couple of those.
Thank you.
So I know we're short of time, but so quickly, future plans. We already have started on some of this work. We're working with our sheriff now and a research company to set up a kind of, we hope, a shorter, smaller term research project where we provide the public safety risk information to our deputies working out on patrol, have them use that information to inform their decision regarding citation versus arrest. I don't think we're ever intending that it will dictate a decision because there are so many other factors that the officers have to consider. But we want to not only do that, but we want to measure it and see if it actually leads to better decisions or not. Pretrial monitoring guidelines in response to violation of supervision conditions. That may not sound like a hard thing, but especially with violation tolerance, different members of the criminal justice community kind of have different standards of tolerance for violations of pretrial release. Some instances, one person would say that person must be brought back into jail and someone else may say not. So that's been an issue we've been struggling with a bit. We're continuing to work on that. And then we have implemented a pretrial information system so we can get away from spreadsheets and hand counts. We brought our county IT manager with us to give you a real brief summary of that work.
Okay. Thanks, Ted. My role was really to provide a business analyst and programmer for this project and to ensure we had a good, solid project plan before we started development. And so to tell you a little bit about the application, it's web-based. It's very portable, meaning there's some opportunities for some other sites to look at the software if they're interested. It's heavily integrated with our ADAMS system, which is basically our jail management software. There's an import button to bring information in, or you can enter information manually, or you could import from a different source. So now we have really a good system for getting information or getting data into the system, and we've been collecting, I guess, for over a month now. And so now we're currently evaluating reporting tools. I'm looking at trying to standardize tools not only for this project but for Yamhill as a whole. And so we have a couple of tools that we're going to be looking at and evaluating and making our choice very soon. And we've already identified some reports that we would like to develop to get the information out of the system, and we should be able to start that, get that project plan developed and get that underway very soon. Thank you.
Ted asked me to quickly comment on those last two. Condition parsimony, I always like that word. Tom O'Connor, our Irish advisor, came up with that. But it just means that when we put conditions on their release, we make the least onerous conditions that assure their public safety and appearance. We don't try to put on a lot of conditions that don't do any good. A quick example is GPS. The studies show that that's not generally effective as a condition of pretrial release, although the SCRAM anklet for alcohol monitoring is. So we try to make sure we're using the right conditions when we do release somebody. And then a common theme throughout all of our work has been a focus on victim safety, voice, and needs. And that's statutorily, even constitutionally required under the crime victims' rights to have input in key decisions, and release is certainly one of them.
And then real quickly, just a budget snapshot. To finish, our two focus areas for justice reinvestment in Yamhill County are sentencing and pretrial policies. All of our pretrial system is funded by justice reinvestment funds. We have 2.5 positions dedicated to that function. We budgeted $52,000 for this court automated notification system. We knew we were estimating high because at the time we just didn't have very good data at all on how many calls would go out, how many would be successful. It turns out we way over budgeted. I think we're $500-600 a month is all we're spending on those court date reminder calls. And then it wasn't conceived of originally, but we saw the wonderful work that our IT program has done, so we allocated $15,000 as probably didn't begin to cover the amount of hours invested, but at least as some kind of recognition of the great work of our IT department. And as we finish this program by developing our data dashboards and statistical portion, I could see some more money being allocated to those folks. And unless there are questions, that's our presentation. Of course.
All right, I got one. So really, really great work. So where are your warrants sit now? Where were they before, and where are they now that you've implemented this? I'm just kind of curious because if you've lowered that, that's considerable savings to the entire system.
Yeah. I don't know that we've quantified that, Sheriff. In fact, I know we haven't.
That's a good
obviously,
one. We'll look at that, though.
You know, and maybe what we should have said is when we entered this work, we didn't know what our fare-to-pay rate was. We didn't have a clue. And the first time we measured it, it was at 17%. So anecdotal error, you know, that certainly implies that there is a lot less warrants being issued.
I think you just said what I was about to say, but it's if we have a lower, someone fails to appear, a warrant issues, and that is the way we measure the failures to appear, so there probably is a correlation.
Be good information to collect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a cop, not a sheriff, so I don't deal with pretrial release ordinarily. But a number of us in this room work together with Yamhill County Judge Collins and Ted on an NIJ thing around EBDM, evidence-based decision-making, so I'm quite familiar with what's happened in Yamhill County. And a lot of that work was done, the bulk of that work was done before you had JRI dollars. So my question is this thing packaged tightly enough now that if a county does not have that previous work done, are the JRI dollars sufficient for them to adopt that?
Well, I think we probably did it the hard way because we started from scratch. But I think us, and there's other examples around the nation that in the last few years have really put some really heavy work into the pretrial system. And as a person who minored in plagiarism in college, I would say share, learn from others. We're more than happy to share our information. So I don't think, if you trust us, that you have to start from ground zero. And not only that, there is tons of resources nationally now. The National Institute of Corrections, the Pretrial Justice Institute, NAPSA, and I'm probably forgetting others. So there's a good science out there and a lot of knowledge, and it can be accessed quite easily, really.
So borrowing helps.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot, like Ed said, there's a lot out there now. There didn't used to be. We've made tremendous progress on evidence-based decision-making and evidence-based programs. And tip of the hat to the legislature for years ago saying you need to do this in your programs, and now it's being translated into court process.
I think next we have Coos Bay that's have their presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Greta, you're on.
Okay, good morning, Ms. Winters. And thank you to Mr. Caldwell and the CJC for inviting Coos County up here today to share the program that we have. You can see Judge Barron is off to the side. I don't know if he's going to have any words at the end. So we've done something a little bit differently in Coos County. We have a different focus with our JRI funds. We're extremely limited with what we can do after arrest, pre-sentence, pre-trial, pre-arraignment. We have 49 jail beds operating for a population of about 60,000. So we didn't have a lot of wiggle room there. So what we did, we decided to focus on downward departures and how we were going to utilize that program. So my elected, Paul Frazier, as well as the Director of Community Corrections, Mike Krim, decided that something that they wanted to try was to embed a deputy DA within community corrections. And I was the lucky name drawn out of the hat. So I actually sit in community corrections with my parole and probation officers to work with the clients as well as the officers. So a case comes up in the DA's office. One of my coworkers thinks maybe this person will be right for a downward departure. We run through a vetting system through parole and probation, whether or not they think this person will have a possibility for success, and then we go from there. Right now, there are 44 people on our downward departure caseload. That's an approximate savings. You know, if all of those 44 people were revoked and sent to prison, you know, today, it would be a $3.4 million approximate cost to the state of Oregon. So we're monitoring all those people, and our measuring stick is safely supervised in the community. Can this individual be safely supervised? That's always our goal. we have, so the JRI funds, they fund myself. They also fund a parole and probation officer named Tracy Herning. A typical caseload in Coos County for an officer is 60 to 70 clients. That we try and keep hers around 40 because there's so much specialized supervision. It's a little more intensive that goes into these so that we can be sure that we're keeping these folks on the right track. And also what the JRI funds, they helped with transitional housing, clean and sober housing, which is such an important piece of the puzzle, as well as treatment beds. Drug addiction drives so much crime in Coos County, as I'm sure it does statewide, so it's an incredibly important piece. So we have, for the client, what Ms. Herning can provide them: drug and alcohol treatment, education, mental health services, like I said, housing, moral recognition therapy, anger management, job education. We also have something that's really unique, I think, and wonderful: a dedicated counselor just for our parole and probation clients, and so they can set up personal counseling appointments. So many of these people are they're struggling so much, and they need someone to talk to. And so our counselor is very busy, and she works closely with mental health to be sure these folks get what they need. We also have parent-child interaction therapy. A lot of these folks are getting reunited with their children after a period away, so getting those kids back with the parents, very important. We also have subsidy money for helping people get their identification cards that may have been lost over time, or clothing for a job interview, bus passes. We buy bicycles for people so that they can actually get to a job from their house. Transportation is such a barrier. Coos County is, the court is 25 minutes away from our major hub of Coos Bay, North Bend, and it's difficult for people to get to the court. Our FTA rate is not 2.7%. Unfortunately, it's a little higher than that. And so with the smaller population, it allows the PO to really understand the client's needs, what their abilities are, and give that personalized treatment. For example, we had one gal who, for lack of a better term, she's on a downward departure for she's repeat property, but she was a drug enforcer, and she was the one who she beat up ladies who didn't pay, and so she's in this drug treatment group, and she wasn't sharing. She was really resistant to sharing, and they're like, why? And so the PO said, why won't you share? Why won't you engage? And she's like, I used to beat these women up. I can't break down and share about my struggles in front of these ladies. I need to maintain my credibility on the street. Oh my gosh. So we got her into one-on-one counseling with the drug treatment, and now she's had clean UAs for months. And it's something we're really proud of. So without that one-on-one treatment, these people don't get lost in the weeds. They really get individualized treatment, which is wonderful. Something to touch on, some statistics. I don't have any slides for you guys to watch, but the prison intakes have gone down from Coos. We are a county that has gone from red to green in a very short period of time, which is really wonderful. There's a lot of reasons for that. It would be very arrogant to say it's all because of JRI and the work we're doing. There's a lot of factors going on. But that being said, in the full year 2015, we sent 17 women to prison out of Coos County for first intakes as well as downward departure revokes. This year to date, we've sent 4. So it's about $1 million difference between the 2 years, and I can only think of a few women on the bubble in Coos who would be going between now and the new year.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
From 17 to 4,
Yes.
Are you attributing most of that to downward? To that
That's
work,
what
or are there other factors?
There are other factors. We've had staffing turnover in the DA's office. We've had, it all depends on what kind of waves of crime are coming through. So like I said, I wouldn't ever say, it's all because of the work that we're doing. There's a multitude of factors, but in general, we are down. And so I can say Coos County is doing, frankly, their share to keep the population down. And I do a quarterly report for His Honor as well, so that he can see the prison numbers. And in the second quarter of 2015, Coos County sent 30 men to prison, and in the second quarter of 2016, we sent 18. So we're down there as well.
We have another question.
Greta, do you have, in that you were talking about you and the probation parole work on a appropriateness plan for downward departure, do you use a risk tool for that, or what's your process?
They have the LSCMI and everything that they do, but a lot of these people who are right for a downward, they've been in the system. They know who these people are, and Coos is really unique. I think part of the reason this program works so well is we're a smaller county. Like I said, we have 60,000 people, and everybody knows everybody. And so a lot of the probation officers are like, well, let me tell you, I went to high school with this person. So we get so much information about these people. And what I do is when they give me a name, I run them through OECI, and then I pull every file off the shelf that we have stored in the basement, and I read all the old fact sheets, we run a fresh CCH, get their new criminal history, call over to other counties and see, and we really truly vet these people to see and what their barriers are. And that's where the small county it kind of helps, because we can say, oh, this person comes from, frankly, a known family that does drugs. Okay, well, this is going to be their biggest barrier. We can work with that. Versus, oh, this person's really naturally assaultive, probably not a great choice. So we try and really make a holistic decision about someone instead of treating these names, I've said before, just like cattle. When you're in a DA's office, your volume is so high, it's just a name on a piece of paper, and they fall into the grid here, and off we go. There's no thinking about what's best for frankly, the defendant, the victim, and the community at large. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is make just better decisions. Thanks. Yeah. And then if I can share one success story, really wonderful. When I just started in the Parole and Probation Department in November, and it was a big change coming to the bench and asking for second chances on downward departures, because it used to be a one-and-done program. And I went to, not His Honor, a different judge, and I had asked for a second chance on this young man. And he just hung his head during the sentencing, and he's just like, I'm just lost. And that to me is like, well, I can help lost. We can do that. We can work with that. So from November to now, he had a long history of unemployment, homelessness, methamphetamine use. His mother is in prison on a Measure 11 assault case. She's not getting out till 2022. So that tells you kind of where he's coming from. He entered Berea First Step, which is a clean and sober transitional housing and treatment facility, graduated successfully. He's employed full-time at a fish plant, and he's now the shift manager. He has his own housing. He's extremely proud of his accomplishments. He's left all of his old associates behind. And something that he did that the probation officer said no one on our caseload has ever done before is he's always wanted to donate to charity. And he saw a commercial on TV for the Shriners Hospital, and he said, my heart just broke for those kids. And so he sent in $5, and they sent him like a little Shriners teddy bear with the hat. And he said it's just his most prized possession now that he can finally help someone. So we have a lot of wonderful stories like that, and I hope to have many, many more in the future. Is there anything?
No, we're short of time, but I do want to point out that it's really uplifting to have a deputy DA who cares that much. The DA turned over the responsibility and basically told the other deputies, if you want to go this, you're going to have to go through her, and she does a lot of work with this. We have been successful because downward departures were kind of a privilege that were looked upon beforehand, and we've come back now, and there's certainly people that I've given a second chance to. She's also, when they realize that somebody is not doing something, has no qualms about coming in and saying this person is not going to be successful, and we've sent them to prison. But we've saved dollars, and I sometimes cringe at that, because we shouldn't be just looking at something to save dollars, but we should be looking at it to save people and to enhance community safety. And I think this program has, and it's driven by a good probation staff, and the fact that she's there and has control of that from the DA. Paul Frazier, give him a lot of credit for making sure that that's done, that the program is successful. I mean, all these programs, we have to wait several years to see how they work. We can't say 1 or 2 years it's a failure, we do it. We've done that too often. So as long as we have a long time to look at that, this program continues the way it is, it will be very successful. We'll save a lot of money, and we'll save a lot of lives, not only in the community, but the individuals themselves.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Our pretrial release program is we have no space.
I think Hood River's up, Karen and Jamie.
Yeah.
Hello. So I'm Jamie Hebner, and I am the commander of Hood River County Parole and Probation and Division of the Sheriff's Office. And first, want to thank everyone for allowing us to be here.
what I want to start out with saying is similar to Coos, Hood River is very, very small with lack of resources. And so what Justice Reinvestment has allowed us to do is internally fill gaps that we were seeing with our offenders, and that is in treatment and housing. But it also allows us to implement a very innovative program using technology to our benefit through an agreement with the Oregon State Sheriff's Association with Telmate. Telmate has a new program called Guardian, and it's a application that goes on a smartphone, and it tracks the offender through GPS. The offender actually checks in with us, and so what that really allows us to do is focus our resources on our highest risk offenders and utilize Guardian on low risk. We still supervise in Hood River low-risk offenders as well as misdemeanors, and research and evidence is showing us the less contact we have with them, the less we are involved in their lives, the better off that they are. And so by having them check in through an application on a smartphone, it also has a FaceTime application, it's limiting our contact, limiting their contact with our office and high-risk offenders. I'm starting to collect data. As said earlier, it's too soon to tell any type of outcomes, but we have seen it's kept offenders out of our office. We have used it in reduced jail beds for violations, technical violations. But what we're really developing is it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not to replace any type of tool that is already out there being utilized, such as Scram or different bracelets. It's just another tool in our toolbox, and so that's what we are using.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm County Commissioner for Hood River County, and I'd like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about resources and challenges. And it was alluded to a little bit earlier by Chief Teague around is the Yamhill example something that can be packaged somewhat as a kit and transferred to other areas? And possibly in different shapes and forms, maybe. In my region, I've been working around reform efforts, not only on the criminal justice side, but in a more wraparound approach that involves the CCO healthcare transformation model as well, wrapping around and integrating services. But one challenge I have found in bringing nationally recognized practices, release mechanisms, evidence-based models into the justice system is a resistance of the system itself to change. And we work in a unique situation in our counties. We have a 4-county regional incarceration facility, NORCOR. So I have 4 of everything. I have 4 sheriffs, 2 DAs, or 4 DAs, and luckily our judicial district is wrapped around the region, so it's just one district, and so there's 4 judges. But you bring all these people together and you talk about devising systems and protocols and flowcharts like Yamhill has created, and that's a challenge. And there's a lot of national availability of technical support. Well, they will come and help you. I've had National Institute of Corrections do an intercept mapping initiative in our community. We've worked through that. Their Pretrial Justice Institute does have funds available to provide technical support, or they will come and help you inform your participants and help show you examples of other models that are out there. But to get these folks in the room and actually create conversations around system approach changes is a huge challenge. And the biggest challenge I see, the reason for, is because there's not enough top-down incentive and support. Judges, DAs, defense, everybody involved has their own little islands out in every district, and they're all different. All models are different. Our county model of corrections is very different from the neighboring county model of corrections. Our jail is very different. The way we are remote, we're rural, we're resource limited. We make do with what we have and create systems with what we have. So we need to work on top-down support and incentives to create these systems and go through these processes. That EBDM approach that Yamhill went through, I would guess, took at least a year to get through.
Several years.
Several years. And they alluded to lots of technical support and lots of training. That takes so long. I've been working in my region for a year and a half. We've gone through system intercept mapping. I've put what I call a call to action with all the county commissioners. We've all signed on to a call to action to take a look at these systems and look for opportunities, efficiencies, and making sure we're effectively utilizing our incarceration facility. That has taken me 6 months to get judges to come to the table, to get a DA to come to the table, to get people to come and talk about how to look at these systems and potentially make improvements. So I look to you as a recommending body to keep that in mind, that in order to create these systems, especially the Yamhill is a great example. In order to create a Yamhill type system around the state for all the different jails and all the different mini systems that are out there, we need a statewide approach for incentivizing and supporting. Anyway, thank you.
Now you know the challenges that we had trying to get 3194 implemented and enacted. I think, and you raise I think an excellent point. And when you look at whether sheriffs are elected, DAs are elected, legislators are elected, and judges, so you have all of these pieces unless everyone actually agrees. And I just happen to know the good judge, Your Honor, and when I said borrowing, that's because a lot of years ago he borrowed my suitcase to go to China. But you're right, it does take, but I'm not convinced that it takes the top down for it to happen, because we struggled with that during putting 3194 together. I think more importantly, it takes all the entities in the jurisdictions coming together. I think if I look at historically, Your Honor, took this up himself a lot of years ago. He was very interested in this subject and attempted to try to get us to adopt this. He worked hard when we went through 3194. So I agree with you, and I don't have that magic piece to say how do we get everybody together. I know that the various associations, whether you're talking the Sheriff's Association and all the associations, do have these discussions. Now, whether they can get agreement with all 36 counties is a whole other issue. But yeah, and I need to move along. But I do thank for the presentation.
Comment?
Yes.
I want to just punctuate what Commissioner Joplin said, and I hadn't thought about it until she said it. With regard to the report itself that we're going to review shortly, Senator Winters, I have to contend just a little bit. Something that Jason and I deal with is trying to move our associations to appreciate, not just appreciate, but to understand and to maneuver among the research and the evidence that is causing our profession to change. And one of the difficulties we have is the leadership that's not getting exposed to that at DPSST through the Center for Policing Excellence. One of the things we're still contending for there is researchers to come in and apprehend that research and translate it for small agencies. We still need that funded. That might be a recommendation we need here so we can meet her goal.
Well, I think we can make that kind of recommendation, but that's one goal, but I think there's a broader, if I hear her conversation correctly, it's more than just the DPSST piece. I think, when we start talking about the judicial branch, and you've got the judicial, you've got the sheriffs, you've got the chiefs, you've got, the DAs, you've got all these, and then you've got the victims piece. All of these are pieces and components that make up our public safety system, and unless everybody is in agreement. Then you have that other component out there that we don't talk a lot about here. You've got the county commissioner, or those elected officials that are in the various communities. So we really are talking about, and honestly, if I had a magic wand, we would have done 3194. I think all four of the legislators who were convening the group and staff, were in accord as to what we thought, should go forward. That didn't mean that we were able to wave our magic wand and make it happen. I just need to put that there because we had some components that we had some huge resistance, from all these various pieces that I talked about. So I'm going to move forward but I do thank you for raising it because it is something that I think is worthy of further conversation. And I think next I've got Madeline.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to keep this pretty brief so that we can get a little bit back on track. So my name is Madeline Dardot. I'm a grant analyst with the Criminal Justice Commission. At your last meeting, we let you know of a grant opportunity that the Criminal Justice Commission had applied for through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. It's a maximizing justice reinvestment federal grant, and we're pleased to come back to you all and let you know that we were awarded. The Criminal Justice Commission was awarded about half of the grant amount that we expected, but considering that we already have one federal maximizing justice reinvestment grant, we were actually really pleased that they saw fit to send more money to Oregon for our projects. So just want to give you a brief update on where we are now and what we are going to be doing moving forward. So just briefly, we received $875,000 from the Federal Justice Reinvestment Grant. We were able to combine that with $1 million of other federal funding for a total project budget of $1.875 million. The project is going to be a duration of 3 years. And the goal is to fund and train professional LPSIC coordinators that are going to be shared between county groupings across the state. These coordinators are meant to provide not just administrative support, so looking at putting together agendas and making sure that rooms are set up, but really high-level professional analytical support for these bodies. This is obviously not a full-time job in all of the counties that we were looking at, and so these groups are going to be shared, these coordinators will be shared among groups of 2 to 5 counties. As we started to talk with folks about this kind of sharing of a single employee between counties, we came up against some problems regarding being able to insure them, making sure that they have equal retirement, and just counties having to really be able to navigate that burden. Luckily, the Association of Oregon Counties stepped in and volunteered to employ the coordinators. So they will actually be employees of the Association of Oregon Counties, and they'll handle kind of the HR headache that comes with having these folks. That being said, the daily direction of the coordinators will be coming from the LPSICs themselves. Go to the next one. So we were we talked to several counties focused in the 3 out of the 4 RIC regions. So we decided, so the metro region, some of them have, whether they are actual full-time staff, whether they're part-time staff, whether they're just kind of county folks that come in and do the LPSIC part-time. We found that there was more significant support in the metro area, and so we decided to focus on the central eastern region, the northwest coastal region, and the southwest region. So these are listed the counties that we spoke with. You'll see that there are some natural pairings kind of within these counties. So Commissioner Joplin spoke earlier of Hood River, Gillum, Sherman, and Wasco sharing NORCOR. So that's a possibility of those 4 counties, in addition to probably Wheeler coming together to share a common coordinator. Yamhill and Polk, maybe Klamath and Lake. So these are counties that already may share either LPSIC membership or some type of service or a judicial district, but that it made sense to be able to kind of combine them together. Okay. So what are these coordinators going to do? As I mentioned before, they're not just going to be agenda setters. These will be high-level analytical staff. The National Institute of Corrections has done actually a fairly significant amount of research and putting together best practices around criminal justice coordinating staff, and this actually comes from them, of their kind of 6 main areas: facilitation, research and analysis. So being able to go out when you have a meeting and someone says, hey, you know what, I'd really like to know more about this. Can we have a report at the next meeting? That doesn't fall on one of the very busy members around the table. That's actually that's a staff member that can go out, find that information and bring it back. Presentation instruction. Once they get the information, they come and they are able to present it. Project management, kind of keeping the ball rolling. Consultation happens in some counties and not in others. And then information clearinghouse. So being able to go out and get data, present data. Go to the next. But what I think is more interesting, over the past couple of months, as we were waiting to hear on the grant, myself and the representatives from the Association of Oregon Counties were able to go out and talk to all of those potential county sites that that were just up on the screen. And we asked them, what would you use this coordinator for? I mean, the goal of the grant is to basically provide this resource to expand the capacity of your LPSIC to engage in other, and to to engage in projects and take on issues that you wouldn't otherwise have the ability to do because the folks around the table, again, are very busy. And so this is what we heard. By far, I think everyone said data gathering, some way to do kind of a basic gathering, analysis, and presentation of local data. Group facilitation. So, that's before, during, and after meetings. Grant opportunity identification. You know, a lot of the counties that we've spoke with have little resources coming in, and so the opportunity to have someone that can go out and look for grant opportunities and then also kind of follow through that with that process of preparing the application. Keeping the ball rolling was a really big one. You know, you can have a meeting and have a lot of great ideas that come to the table, but if there's no one to make sure that that's being dogged in between meeting A and meeting B, a lot of times things just fall to the wayside despite everyone's best efforts. Obviously, assistance with the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program. That's how the CJC actually got involved in this work in the first place, is by engaging with LIPSICs and around justice reinvestment and really understanding that, you know, their responsibility had been increased, and a lot of them weren't really set up or had the resources to be able to take on what was being asked of them, not just in the grant application process, but also in the follow-up and the reporting that you all, I'm sure, love so much, those of you that are familiar with it. This one's really interesting. So facilitate cross-system collaboration, specifically related to housing and mental health. Over and over and over again, as we went out to counties, they said, you know, we would love to have better communication with our housing folks and people that know about other housing resources outside of the public safety system, and then we want a better we want a better relationship with our mental health providers. We want them at our tables. We don't know how to do that, or I don't have the time to do that, and so we kind of see these bodies as really that, you know, the perfect place for those conversations to happen. And if you have a staff person that can chase that down and keep that line of communication open, that could be really helpful. And this was actually reinforced again. The CJC just completed their annual LIPSIC summary that is statutorily required by the LIPSICs. And one of the questions that we asked was, you know, what are the criminal justice topics, related topics, that are of most interest to your LIPSIC? By far, number one was mental health, and number two was jail diversion. So I think that kind of reinforces what we heard over the past couple of months. And then reinvigorating and maintaining the LIPSIC. Some of these are very low functioning right now, and so there's going to be some work just to get people in a room together, and then keeping them there. And then the ones that are a little bit more high functioning, you know, a lot of them are just doing kind of reporting, though. This is, you know, what are you doing over in the sheriff's office? This is what we're doing in the DA's office. And so this is basically to move away from, not that that's not important, but to make sure that that's maybe the beginning of your meeting, and then the rest is really diving in and engaging in substantive and locally identified issues. Next. So another portion of this, of the grant that I'm particularly excited about is, you know, these positions don't exist except for in maybe one or two, possibly 3 counties in Oregon right now. These are new positions. There will be no other position in these counties like the one this person's going to walk into. So they're going to need significant support and training. And so AOC, CJC are partnering with the National Policy Consensus Center to put together, to do a kind of a staged curriculum of training sessions for both the coordinators and the chairs over the course of the 3-year grant. So this is going to include, obviously, training sessions where we bring them together twice a year, but it's also in the quarterly peer-to-peer meetings, so where the coordinators themselves can actually get together and learn from each other. They'll also have the opportunity, you know, sometimes there'll be things that they necessarily don't want to share out in the open. They'll also have the opportunity to be able to make those phone calls to the National Policy Consensus Center and say, hey, you know, we've got this disagreement among personalities and I'm not sure how to handle it, and to be able to help them with things like that. And then the last part is just a coordinated online resource platform where we can, on the CJC side, kind of feed them information on the topics that they're interested in, having to do with criminal justice, but also the National Policy Consensus Center can continue to work with them through facilitation. So it's like a one-stop shop for information for these folks. And then as far as the training sessions and what we're really excited about them getting out of their work with the National Policy Consensus Center is basic facilitation skills, the soft skills. You know, again, the CJC is excited about being able to have the opportunity to provide any of the kind of criminal justice focused training, but as far as, you know, how do you bring people together, and then how do you get them to work together, how do you keep them working together, and then how do you make sure that that working together actually gets you to some kind of product that's good and functional and increases your capacity like we're hoping for with this grant. So that's what we think is going to be really, really crucial with this partnership with the National Policy Consensus Center. And so finally, I just want to reiterate kind of a guiding principle of the project, which is that, LIPSCs are local bodies. They're local county bodies. And the coordinators will be funded by the CJC. They'll be employed by the Association of Oregon Counties. But they're going to be working at the direction of the LIPSCC and the LIPSCC chair. So it's not going to be kind of folks coming in and saying, you have to work on these projects. Really, it's, like I said before, if you had this resource, what would you be able to do? And so we're pretty excited about being able to see kind of how that develops. It's going to look very different in every county. And we just look forward to being able to support that growth and those ideas that come up and the work that they do. So more of a kind of a bottom-up approach. That's it.
One quick question. I think this is absolutely great, and it certainly could help some of the smaller counties, and we've heard some of the issues of trying to coordinate efforts. My question is to the counties that have county staff assigned, would they be eligible for this training? I mean, it would be nice if everybody's kind of working on the same sheet of music.
Yeah. So this is right now, we're in the process of kind of, this is a proposed training from the National Policy Consensus Center, and we're in the process of negotiating that. That's something we would really like to see. We would really like to be able to open that up. So even if you have, maybe they're not a specific staff, but they are, they're just somebody that, does most of the heavy lifting in your LIPSCC. So that could be someone that could attend these trainings, and someone that could even, take advantage of the online resources and the communication network that builds.
Thank you. Okay, Mike.
All right. I've been instructed. I've got 2 minutes. This entitled Draft Pretrial Reform Work Plan in front of you. This is just that. It's a draft. It's a culmination of 2 trips that were taken from members of different Oregon public safety folks and courts and everybody working together. The Chief Justice organized a trip to the Chief Justice's conference. Dave Factor led a group of folks from various counties in public safety, DA, sheriff, community corrections, and some of the people in this room went on that trip. The CJC also organized a trip, and some of the other people in this room went on that trip. And both trips were focused on pretrial reform. When we got back from both of those groups, the 6 or 8 of us or so got together around a room. We said, okay, well, what's the next steps for this? And what the next steps are is what you have in front of you is this draft proposal plan. As has already been spoken up, we were teed up perfectly by the work that Yamhill County's done. Nationally, there's a lot of conversation around how to do pretrial better, both because states are being sued and also because we think we can get better results by doing things differently. And so all the members of those groups came back together and agreed, whether they were district attorneys, sheriffs, anyone who went on those judges, that there are areas in Oregon's pretrial justice system that we can make improvements. So what we've put together here is we kind of just whiteboarded, and at the very last page you can actually see the whiteboard that we were working off of. And so Dave Factor and I tried to capture where we thought we could focus in subcommittees on this issue and just examine Oregon, examine what's working here, what we should improve, what we should stay the same, and think about things also from a national perspective. As you go through the work plan, Dave and I just listed some potential folks who went on those trips that could kind of head up these subcommittees for us as kind of functional co-chairs. But the big idea and the ask for you all here today is that this body, the Public Safety Task Force, we felt as a group could be and should be the oversight body for those subcommittees to do their work with practitioners who are doing pretrial work around the state, and then come back to you all and report back on their findings. And ultimately, it would be this group who would make recommendations to both the Chief Justice and the governor and the legislature on where we should go with pretrial reform. So it's really a proposal to study this, to look at what's happening nationally, look what's happening in Oregon, see if there are areas for improvement, and then to report back to you all as the oversight body. So that's the ask. Hopefully you all are up for that.
You want to
I don't know if we need a formal vote.
vote on this?
Jason, you were working others.
Chair, I'll move that we adopt the recommendation.
It's been moved that we adopt the recommendation.
I'll second it.
It's been seconded. Is there any opposition? Hearing none?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
I think it was 3 minutes, but that's okay. Okay. I think Brad, Ross, you and
All
Kelly.
right. Thank you much. So one of the big things we need to accomplish in this meeting is to get the Public Safety Task Force report to the legislature approved. So we're going to start with just going very quickly through the report. We sent it out to you a week or two ago. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to go through it. It is long, but there's lots of graphs, so hopefully you were able to get through it relatively quickly. So we'll start just by kind of going through what's actually in the report very briefly, and then if anybody wants to, I guess, discuss at that point you can, or wait till the end, whatever you prefer. All right, so we start with the executive
I think
summary.
probably let's wait for the end if you've got any questions, because if not, we'll get really bogged down.
Okay, wait for the end. So the executive summary is the part that actually gets sent out to all the members of the legislature with a link to the report itself. So we tried to keep that kind of a quick overview, a quick synopsis, and pack some numbers in there without it being too heavy. We talk about sentencing changes from 3194, and we have a quick summary of kind of how the savings we've actually seen from those. We did a quick overview of the grants program, and then we detailed the recommendations that you'll need to vote on today. And then moving into the first section, we tried to organize the report around the 4 different goals of justice reinvestment. So we start with talking about prison use. We talk about the House Bill 3194 sentencing changes. At the last meeting, we did a presentation for you all about how those sentencing changes actually, what savings they actually achieved versus what we had projected back in 2013 when the bill was passed. We talk about the prison population and the forecast. And we talk about CJC's efforts to track prison use in the biennium. We've developed a couple of different ways to do that. And then there's a couple that we are going to run by you at the end here to see if you think that they should have a place in the report or not. And then we focus again on the Justice Reinvestment Grant Program in more detail. The second chapter is all about recidivism. That's not really broken down into separate sections. It's just the recidivism report. And then we also have links to our recidivism dashboards on our website so that you can kind of look at that in more detail, look at it by county, look at it over time and by different crime types. The third section is on public safety. So in that we talk about reported crime. We talk about LIPSICs. And we talk about the LIPSIC grant that Madeline just spoke about earlier. And then we also talk about the RIC meetings, which has kind of been our, as you all know, our effort to go out to the different counties and to engage members of the LIPSIC and to kind of check in with how justice reinvestment's going. We also talk a little bit about our dashboards where we're able to show prison use and short-term trans leave and other things from 3194 in that section as well. And then under accountability, we talk about the earned discharge program from 3194. And then the fifth chapter, we talk about the other programs that kind of we didn't think fit into one of the goals specifically, although they're all connected up. So we have a write-up on the Center for Policing Excellence, and then we have some numbers of people that have been able to go through the leadership training, the 2 different leadership trainings at CPE over at DPSST. We talk about the Oregon Knowledge Bank and the cost-benefit analytical tool. And I know you guys have all had presentations on Oregon Knowledge Bank, CPE, and cost-benefit tool in previous meetings. So pretty much most of the things in this report should not come as a surprise. It's all things that have been kind of presented to you in the past year, I think, at your meetings, but we tried to sum them all up. And then the last section, we have conclusions and recommendations. So we wanted to kind of encompass that all into one section. And that's based on your discussion from past meetings. So we've talked about the Justice Reinvestment Grant Programs, the importance of continuing to fund those. We've talked about the Public Safety Task Force continuing. We talk about the Family Sentencing Alternative Project, or program, that should be program, sorry. And that is, you had a presentation at the last meeting from DOC about that. And then a couple of matters for further consideration that there aren't recommendations on at this point, at least as of the last meeting, which was the juvenile earned review and short-term transitional leave. So hopefully we captured in that section your discussion from the last meeting and where we left that those would be something the task force would continue to consider. So at this point, we were going to just show you.
That might be a good point to stop it.
Yeah. If anybody wants to talk about what's in the report at this point, the other thing that we were going to highlight were some things that we wanted you to consider for adding into the report.
Chief, do you have any comments?
I have a number of suggestions, none of them substantive, and I just suggest that we be allowed to pass those on to CJC and they make those changes or not without us having to weigh in on them. I'll just hand this to Ross.
It's all critiquing my grammar and use of commas.
Well,
I'm from Lewis County, Washington.
He's an English major.
I have some questions, but they're just clarifying questions, not substantive.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion now that we're in the discussion phase of the report before we get to the next one?
I guess I'd like to hear if Russ has things that he's considering adding to the report. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, we have a couple of different things. Most of them are different ways to track. We've really tried to make an effort to track the grants programs and the savings from the grants programs, but it's very difficult. So we'll get into that in a little bit. That's kind of the other thing we wanted you to consider, and we have slides on all that here.
But you want us to act on it, right?
Yeah, I guess we'd like a decision on whether or not you think those have a place in the report, if we should expand the report to include those, or if you think we should leave them out.
Well, shall we take the content and the recommendations of the report and discuss that now and then go and to the addition that you would like to have included? I see everyone's quiet, so it says to me that everyone has read the report, everyone understands the report, and everyone agrees to the recommendations.
Yes.
Steve, you'd been too quiet. I knew that you probably was.
Not necessarily. I'd like to make a general comment, and then I do have a couple of questions. And I think something that's been missing in our discussion this morning, and I can appreciate all the success stories, and I appreciate everything that's being done with justice reinvestment, but I think it's important to note, to bring us back down into reality, that I'll read the headline from the Salem paper. Violent crime rates increase in Salem and state, and I don't have to tell you across the country. Now, as I look around the room, and some of them have left, but there's people in this room who, when we had the last wave of crime rate, of crime increase in this country, were some were in college, some were in high school, some were in junior high school, some were maybe in grade school. And I can tell you from experience, and there are some others in this room that should be able to tell you from experience, and for any of you who have traveled Europe, you know that you can go from museums to graveyards, and there's signs all over that say those who fail to heed history are doomed to repeat it. And the point I'm trying to make here is this. It's all well to do what we're doing, but this has been done across the country, and the result that we're starting to see is crime rate increases. And I just want us to keep our eye on that, because these are not just numbers. We've talked a lot about, in this room, about the people we send to prison, but we forgot to talk about the reason we send those people to prison. And those numbers are crime victims. Those are crime victims on the street. I know the numbers aren't huge, but I think there were 3 more murders in Salem this last year than there were the year before. Well, those are 3 more. And those are 3 more people or more that probably went to prison as a result. So I won't belabor it, but I hope you keep that in mind when you think about what we're doing here. I've got one general comment, then, like I say, I've got a couple of questions. In the on page, I believe it is 30 and 31 in the report, It shows prison forecasts, but, and if I'll indulge you, I'm going to read some of my notes here. But it doesn't mention the forecast that started the whole 3194 commission process and was declared as the reason we needed reductions in sentences to avoid prison growth. That 2012 forecast predicted 16,000 inmates by 2023. And the measure of 16,000 isn't even on this chart. It's so high. So I think we have to, let's make sure that we show where we came from. Again, history, because that was a fact then. It was 16,000, a little more then, and I think we have to show that in the chart. The discussions about the effects of the changes in law to reduce sentences and lengthen short-term transitional leave consistently say that, quote, there are no expected further reductions in the future. I think that that statement is misleading and incomplete. There will be further reductions in prison population, but they will be in the form of maintaining the savings that have already occurred. 3194 was never designed to continually reduce sentences in the future beyond the initial impacts. To say otherwise is to imply that we have to continually have greater reductions in sentences, which was never part of the 3194 discussions in the first place. 3194 bed reductions were designed to work exactly as they have, and this language should be changed to say that the bed savings will be maintained in the future as was originally designed into 3194. Finally, when the report discusses robbery 3 and identity theft, it's noted that the length of sentence has actually risen slightly. Later, it's noted that the number of intakes for these kinds of crimes has actually gone down. There is simply no discussion of the fact that if you take some defendants out of a prison sentence for these crimes and put them on probation, the remaining sentence averages no longer contain the sentences of those defendants who most likely would have received shorter sentences. And if those shorter sentences had been included, the overall length of sentences would have, in fact, at least stayed flat, if not gone down. I think any fair analysis should include those facts. Then I have 4 quick questions for you.
You want us to comment?
You want us to comment on?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think the staff should and comment on the comments that you made with respect to going forward in the future on 3194.
Sure.
So I'll try to. I think if you could give us what you were reading from, that would be helpful, because then we can.
I'll forward it to you.
Yeah, that'd be good. We can look at that.
I just wanted to get on the record with it, but I'm happy to forward all this to you.
I think also, since it's on the record that actually the response to your comment also needs to be on the record. So if you could get it to Micah Ross, it would be very helpful, because you know as well as I do, when this report goes into the legislature and there's other comments out here, if we don't have that balance, it's not very good.
Can I join in, Chair, with just one comment? So, not to lose the momentum or the point, and Steve must have been looking at my notes because I had one of the same issues that I really think is important, and that is the forecast. I think it was back, 2012 or 2013. And I know Chair Winters knows this, and there's many in the room that sat at those hearings when we were talking about a projection of 16,000, and I think there were considerations for some serious public safety decision making regarding about how do we adjust to that number, and I think that is helpful historically, because some people to pick up the report, some legislators may be brand new, they don't know that history, and I think that should be added to the report so we understand, gosh, here's what we thought, and for whatever reason that's what we thought, and now here's what it is. 16,000 isn't even on the chart, and we're making progress, but we didn't panic and act on really faulty statistics. Just my comment on that particular part.
So, so I both want to comment to that and then see if you want us to make a change. On both of these forecasts, the pages that Steve pointed out, 30 and 31, we include the April 2013 forecast, which was the forecast that the legislature was working with before adoption of this legislation. So you'll know that in October, like we're just today or yesterday, the October forecast just came out. And so that gets a lot of conversations going, but the legislature actually makes their budgeting decision and everything else always based on the April one that's in session. Since we've started doing reports and showing graphs to everybody, we've always included the April 2013 forecast and never the October 2012 forecast. So if you want us to make that change, we should discuss that, and we can do that. It would be a departure from what we've been doing consistently since the beginning of this. So that might look a little bit odd or cherry-picky to some if we're changing that right away. Also, on the 16,000, I think one of the things that maybe is changed is when we were in 2012 in the forecast and even the 2013 forecast, we were looking at the total prison population together in one forecast. What you have before you is the female and the male split out. And Steve, you said by 2023 we would hit 16,000. If you add the female and the male numbers to each other on the green forecast, you'll get over 16,000. So what we've done is we've broken it into the male and female, I think because we've been dealing with issues of, Coffee Creek situation. We could put it back together into one forecast. That's something that we could do. But you'll see that if you add those numbers up, you get back to 16,000, which is probably not actually too much different from the October 2012 forecast. I don't have it in front of me to really compare it to the April 2013 forecast, but it's probably pretty close. And I think maybe that's why there's some confusion about the 16,000 number no longer being there. If you add these two up the way that we would have done it back then, you'd have 16,000.
Mike, could you just add a third chart, which is the total, then that way you cover it?
Yeah. So we can definitely do that. The UCR data that Steve brought out, this is both obviously negative news when there's violent crime increases. In here it says property crime rates have decreased, although consistently have still been higher in Oregon. With the Justice Reinvestment Program, I guess my question is, to what extent do you want us to include this in the report? The Justice Reinvestment Program, of course, has been focused on property and drug crimes, and I think that's been pretty, in all of our counties, almost pretty much uniform. So if you want us to focus on the property crime decrease, we could do that. Kelly has done some analysis, works with OSP. If she could just talk a little bit about our concerns with the 2015 UCR numbers. We have some pretty serious concerns with those.
Sure. I'm Kelly Officer. I'm a research analyst with the Criminal Justice Commission. And so the FBI released the 2015 crime data just on Monday. So it's fairly new. We work with Oregon State Police pretty closely. They are the agency that sends that data to the FBI. And they compile it from law enforcement agencies around the state. So there were some pretty significant challenges with crime reporting this year, mostly in the metro region. They were not able to report a full year of data. So I believe, some pretty large cities, Portland, Gresham, Beaverton, Tualatin, only were able to submit data for January, February, and March. So the FBI estimated the rest of the year based on what was reported in the first 3 months. That's a pretty significant amount of Oregon's population that's accounted for in those cities. So the 2015 crime data has some consistency challenges with it that would be a challenge. That's for both violent and property crimes. This article here that talks specifically about Salem, I don't think Salem had those issues. So the Salem data is probably very consistent to what's been reported in previous years. But on a statewide look, we have some pretty big challenges with, how accurate is that if we're estimating 9 months for some of Oregon's largest cities.
But it sounds like we created those challenges. It wasn't the FBI.
No, it was not the FBI. It was
I want to comment on that
Sure.
because I am on the Multnomah County LIPSIC and other processes that deals with this, and we've been essentially blind to Portland Police Bureau because they switched to regions, and we can't get access to any of that. By we, I don't mean the defense attorney, I mean the county, the LIPSIC systems cannot get access to regions, and we've been told we won't get access to regions. They won't even put it on the agenda to discuss it in the next couple of years. So that's going to continue to be a challenge, but it's a data-based challenge, not of the creation of the state of Oregon, but really of this national software program that they've adopted.
So we could certainly include, however you want us to include the 2015 data.
I have a question, because if the overall data for the state, if there's a question, I would have some problem including that to my colleagues, no matter who's at fault.
Right.
The other thing, and mostly the violent crime rate in Salem dealt primarily with murder rather than property and what have you, which is what our report really focuses on. And for us to, suddenly go and start talking about the murder rates in Oregon would, and I don't think that belongs in 3194, quite honestly. But anyway, but thirdly, and I would like to get a consensus of what we want to include and combine the male and the female population in a graph to include in the report.
Include that data with the concerns that you've raised. And
we could include that.
That would be the way that you would include it, and then put the concerns that the staff has with that data, and that will inform everybody.
Yeah.
Here's what the thing that concerns me is that, first of all, murder's an important. Murder's the worst crime that there is. I know those numbers are low, at least in Oregon, although across the country it's 10%. And we certainly don't want to go there. But since our concentration on the justice reinvestment was in the drug crimes and the property crimes, I would like it noted that, our property crime rates, while the property crime rate's gone down, the rates remain well above the national average. I think that needs to be emphasized. We've had this problem just about ever since I've been involved in the criminal justice process and crime victims' rights in Oregon. It's a continual problem, and I think it needs to be highlighted.
Steve, one other thing that we can highlight the crime rates with the caveats and put that in there. You mentioned that in the identity theft, especially those numbers, looking at the average length of stay and coming to the conclusion that it wasn't decreasing when, in fact, there would be more people who would be receiving lesser sentences who are now getting probation instead, which would be weighting down the average. That is something that we looked at. It is an analysis that we can do. Kelly Officer and myself 2 days ago in my office sat there and said, let's pretend that every one of those people that got probation actually got an 18-month sentence, which is the very lowest. And we did that analysis in 2015. It brought down the average length of stay by 1 more month. So it continues not to be a bed saver, even at the best case scenario. We know, of course, that not all those people would have gotten 18-month sentences. They would have been probably all over the board. So it's a tricky thing to do, because what we have to do it accurately, we would need to know from each county, okay, which one of these people would you have sent to prison, but you didn't because of justice reinvestment grant programs. Nobody's done that analysis, of course, because it's a lot of work and it'd be hard to do. So we can estimate, we can put that in the discussion. It is totally a valid point that there have been less intakes, and so you would expect to see that. It's not going to have a very big impact, especially when we consider that those presumptive identity theft sentences would be eligible for short-term trans leave. And if we assume, like the rest of the prison population, half of identity theft people got short-term trans leave, we would expect just from that alone a 1.5 average length of stay reduction, a 1.5 month average length of stay reduction, and we didn't even see that. So It gets really complicated, but we can definitely bring in a sentence that says to what you said. It's a fair point, and can put it in the report.
And we did try to talk about, less intakes with the grants programs. We tried to focus on it there to give, we tried to divide. We've had some changes due to the sentencing changes, and we've had some prison savings on the grants program. And it gets very hard to measure the grants program, as Mike alluded to, because you're basically trying to track decision making. And we can't talk to every deputy DA and say, would you have given this guy a downward departure, or every judge and say, would you have given this guy a downward departure absent your justice reinvestment program? It's just not feasible. So we tried to kind of assign savings to the grants program where we could, and then assign it to the sentencing changes where we could.
We do have some short history, though, with the prison population forecast, and I think Michael Kennedy felt pretty comfortable in making some changes because of that, so maybe that's an area we can highlight. I think we do need to highlight the programs because they are working, but I know that it's kind of hard to quantify.
Yeah, and there's a graph we want to show you all that kind of gets at that specific question. Did I get everything in terms of your comments, Steve?
Yes, I still have some remaining questions. I don't know if you want those read and want to comment to them, or if you just want me to send them in, but I just don't want to do or say something that, that's not brought in front of the entire task force.
Steve, my question is whether or not you want them incorporated in the report. The question that you have, because if you want them incorporated in the report, the action today is the day to actually approve the report, the recommendations and what have you in the report in order to get it to the legislature. Just
well, maybe I should.
Then I think you should go ahead and because I think this is the opportunity to do so.
They concentrate on page 25, 26, and 37. On 25, there's a chart showing a slight increase in recidivism for the short-term transitional leave inmates versus non-short transitional leave inmates. Is this due to different levels of seriousness or in-custody behavior? Page 26, the chart showing 95% of short-term trans leave cases completed successfully. Does this mean that 95% completed 90 days of short-term trans leave without being arrested or jailed?
That's right.
Okay, well, if we could note that, that'd be great. Also on page 26 shows short-term trans leave prison bed days saved versus jail beds used for sanctions of short-term trans leave inmates. Does a jail sanction used for the short-term trans leave inmate constitute a failed completion?
No, it would. They would be part of the. It wouldn't be a failed completion. You could get a short jail sanction and remain in the program, so it wouldn't be a failed completion if they got a jail sanction. If I'm understanding you correctly.
Why would they get the jail sanction?
Okay. Jeremiah?
Jeremiah Stromberg, Department of Corrections, and I'm the, lack of a better term, the supervisory authority for all trans leavers and make the determination of whether or not they failed the program or have successfully completed. We do allow parole and probation officers to use local sanctions to correct behavior that does not warrant a return to prison. So let's say a trans leaver fails to report to his PO. If they want to give him a couple of days in jail for not abiding by a directive or a condition, they may. We review those to determine whether it warrants returning to a prison bed or not. And so we do allow some sanctions to occur in the community before revoking, if you will, that trans leave period. If they are arrested for a new crime, that is a guarantee to return to the Department of Corrections. And I think we provided some other statistics, they may not be in this report, as to the number of offenders who actually committed a new crime and what those crimes were and what their new sentences were as well. I believe there were about 12 of the 3,000 that had committed new crimes while on transit.
And we also link to our recidivism report in this report. We didn't want to put the whole recidivism report in this report and make it incomprehensibly long, so we have a link to that, which if people want to dive deeper, they can.
Well, I have to say that's rather troubling news from a crime victim standpoint. But last but not least, on page 37, new recidivism graphs. Average time to recidivate for parole clients is 10.4 months. Average time for probation is 15 months. The question is this: the graph shows, quote, arrested any new crime, quote, convicted misdemeanor or felony, unquote, and, quote, incarcerated felony only, unquote. There doesn't seem to be a figure for incarcerated misdemeanor or felony without incarceration.
So for the incarceration part, that's right, we use the DOC data. Kelly, do we have misdemeanor sentence jail data? It's not something that's available to us. So that's why it's just the felony at DOC. And then obviously a sizable amount of people will end up in probation, but they're caught in terms of the recidivism buckets. They're both in the arrest and the conviction bucket. If they're not incarcerated, they won't show up in the incarcerated bucket, but they would have been convicted, of course, and arrested prior to that. So they show up at 2 out of the 3.
Okay, I'm following you on the the misdemeanor portion, but I'm sorry, you lost me a little bit. The felony without incarceration, wouldn't you still capture that?
It's in the convictions. So if you're convicted, you're going to go 1 or 2 paths. You're going to either be incarcerated or not be incarcerated. So the incarceration group is really a subset of the conviction group.
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right.
And I think one thing that maybe we should make more clear, this occurs to me, is that this is a screenshot of our dashboard on our website. So people can follow this link here in the report, and they can go and look at all this information on our dashboard. It's an interactive data dashboard that people can look at. So this isn't meant to be a graph in some of the ways that the other figures earlier in the report are. This is just kind of an example of some of the information you can see. But I can make that clear so that it makes more sense. Because you'd be able to switch around and adjust all these figures and things. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
Appreciate it. I guess, could I just make one comment and then I'll shut up?
You don't need to do that.
Oh, thank you.
The comment or the shadow?
Well, the discussion kind of highlight my just my concerns, which just as a natural. So this is just a comment because I said this before at this proceeding and others that the work of the Criminal Justice Commission folks is, in my view, it puts us light years ahead of where we were. I mean, we can actually talk about information. We're able to analyze it. We're able to point out, well, wait a minute, that doesn't cover the whole thing, or in our view, and raise issues, and so I think it's really vital to the ongoing, valid consideration of issues. These issues that we have. I think it's really important, but it does emphasize that. And it's kind of the comment. I mean, if I wrote my little summary about the 3194, and I said there's been significant. 3194 has created significant bed savings. Continued funding is absolutely critical wherever you sit in the whatever spectrum or viewpoint you have of what's being done. I think it's critical. We've heard at this commission and through other stuff. A variety of different approaches with different sized counties that meet their individual needs. And as a district attorney, I've heard that constantly when I talk about something I'm doing in my county. Someone else says, "Well, we don't have the housing that you do, the clean and sober housing, or we don't have these options. How can we do that?" And I think this has created a forum exchange of information and funding and so forth that's really critical for allowing local communities to deal with their local issues and resources. And as Judge Barron said, the other thing I'd say is we've got to recognize, and those that read this report, is this is a maturation process, that takes time. And so that's why the reliance, and it's just a comment, it's just the reality, but I guess today's world, I can see sound bites. Somebody picks one piece of data, and that's the driving motivation for their idea of what should be changed or corrected. And there's not much we can do about it other than, I guess, recognize that this is an ongoing, we can't take today's snapshot, and we've got to be mindful of the crime rates, what comes in the door, and all those things informing our policy. It's kind of like a no-brainer, but it's.
Bob, thank you for raising that, because the issue of resources, first from the standpoint, and it was raised earlier with collaboration with other parts of the system, and I'm thinking particularly housing, alcohol and drug treatment, and and drug court. As I talk to individuals around the counties, whether it's my county or other counties, that's a big one. That's a big one, and being able to access what exists with the Oregon Health Authority and CCOs, or mental health and treatment. We're talking about this whole issue of wraparound services, whether we're talking about on the front end of pre, or whether we're talking on the back end of coming back into the community. And the report is silent on those, but actually that's a reality. That's a reality in the public safety system as we talk about how do we address this whole issue of making certain that we've got the resources so that the individual doesn't recidivate. So, it's real. I wanted to do, as you know, a mapping of what's available across the state, as a policymaker, so that we can look how we really do deploy resources.
So, Chair, if I just comment in sort of echoing, I think, what Bob was saying, it seems to me that for me, the takeaway is, we rely on the comprehensiveness of the report, the depth of conversation that we've had over the course of this commission, this task force, so that we can stay at the table, keep talking, and avoid soundbite policy.
I agree with that.
Because I think you're right. We are going to get cherry-picked. There's going to be some things they look at, but if we can say it was vetted here and people talk about it, and we keep talking about it and refer back to the total data, then I think that's our best chance at avoiding that kind of reaction to sound bites.
Madam Chair, if I may add, I would first off like to echo the District Attorney's commitment to continuing the funding of JRI, which is included as a recommendation. I would just probably like to underline that, highlight, and put an exclamation point behind that. I think that's a foundation for going forward. But I'd also like to highlight, something that's not specifically addressed in this report, but has been alluded to throughout all of our conversations, which is the importance of information and accurate data so that we can actually have the conversation, we can see the trends, and we can make an educated decision on what we're actually seeing. What's at the base of that really is the need for the state to prioritize an information system for the Department of Corrections. We're talking about prison use, but yet the State Department of Corrections is dealing with an archaic system that does not provide the type of information that we need in today's world so that the Criminal Justice Commission can do their work. I would commend the Criminal Justice Commission. They've done some wonderful work, and they've provided us day-to-day data that we can get in through their dashboards that is extremely helpful. But they're also handcuffed, so to speak, by an old, outdated data system by the Department of Corrections. And I would like to see the Commission make some kind of recommendation and prioritize a recommendation going forward for the Department of Corrections.
I think what I'm hearing is from a lot of members around is the continuation of the Public Safety Task Force and the work of 3194. I think we realized that, some time ago that there was a need. The more we begin to drill into some of the issues, the more we find the need to have this conversation continually around the table. And so I kind of hear that's what, Bob is saying. I think, that's what, others are saying, that our work isn't completed. That there are other pieces of the system that needs further work, and that CJC needs to continue its effort. I see heads bobbing around the table, and I hope that that may be one of the recommendations. That is one of the recommendations, that we continue the work.
I'd really like to. I don't know how much more you can word this as a recommendation, but certainly strongly, or some word, that we recommend that $52.7 million actually be granted, because any cut to that from a selfish standpoint is going to affect smaller counties much more than it's going to affect larger counties. If we start a program, and if the money gets cut, it's going to affect a smaller county more. And this is the money. I think the promise was, if we saved money, actually, then that money was going to come back. And so I want to stress, I know the 4 legislators that have been here have been very supportive of this. But I think all the legislature has to understand that this money has to go, and we have to try these programs for several years before we say they don't work or whatever it is. But this is extremely important, that the promise that this money is going to be used for this stays here, and it doesn't get caught because of other issues that come up. And I know this legislature has a tough job coming up, especially with PERNS, all that thing. But this is important to continue. We need to strongly recommend this.
We had this very conversation at 7 o'clock this morning in Multnomah County. Mike was there. And I thought that Tim Hartnett did a very nice job. I don't know if you'd left by that time, of articulating the response to the question of is deferred savings really savings, is that if we don't spend this money now, we're spending more money tomorrow. It's not 10 years from tomorrow. It's opening OSPM, in the next month or 2 months. So that's the messaging it has to be. It's not a deferred expense like in years. It's months.
I think it was mentioned, and I would agree, and I think that message has to be in bold type. But also, we tend to think in terms of savings only in the terms of dollars, and not in the terms of human capital. And the reduction and I go back to when we said public safety, and the safety of communities becomes, in my view, extremely important. Are we able to make our communities safer? And to me, that was also embodied when we started doing this work. And it is long-term. It's not something that, you're going to get an instant turnaround and behavior change. And that's why I brought in the whole issue of the resource availability. We've been at this long enough to know, both on entry into the system as well as exit out of the system, that if you don't have some of those resources available, we're DOC is. I tell my community, DOC actually. The individuals who go into the system are a product of the community. We tend to put all the blame on DOC as to what happens, but we don't look at what's available or what's going on in the community that created the situations and what have you in the first place. So I agree. I think we need to make our message to my colleagues that it is important that we continue what we started, and that we don't actually reduce those dollar figures. The other 3 chairs, we were all in agreement last time that we needed to make certain those dollars remain. And so I will be there again this time. I'm sure that the other 3 of my colleagues will also, agree. It's important work. I do think that we're beginning to see some benefits from the work that we've done. So all of you have done, okay, and including my policing excellence in policing. I know, and I'm glad that we invested in that. I'm going to toot the horn of individuals in my community, because we see what's happening nationally across the country. I, had a meeting, and they were already ahead of me, with the chief and the sheriff and the DA and others in this community. We had our Bridging the Community event here to deal with the racial issues in this county. And so I just have to say, I'm going to give a big shout out for my people. We had over 300 some people, about that many, didn't we, Chief, that came, the panel on both sides, both the public safety side as well as the community side. There was not what you see or hear nationally. I would encourage, that kind of format for others. But what came through was the community work. And I'm a big one that believes that problems are solved locally, not solved at my level, and it's that interaction locally, and those initiatives that have taken place from both Chief Teague and Sheriff Myers and DA Beglow and Chief Moore in this community, and it showed. It definitely did show in this community, and I think we had every minority group in my community that was on that panel. So I think that, and I continually just talk to all my guys, and they protect me really well when I get out there in the community. But it's important. I think the community itself have to buy into what we're doing here. If they don't buy in, it won't be successful. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been working on this over the years. And we can see some of the positives. And I was so pleased to hear that, was it Coos that said that the women's population had dropped? Because with that, I think some of us do not want to open either Deer Ridge or go back to the OWCC. So I do personally want to thank all the efforts that's being taken place around the state.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Are you ready for a motion?
I am ready for your motion.
I have one more recommendation. I don't want to fail to underscore the value of modern policing in decreasing the crime that occurs, and it's an immeasurable, you can't measure what doesn't happen. So I want to provide a couple of lines to Ross just under that Center for Policing Excellence, and so I'll provide that to you. I don't have it here, I'll get it to you later. But I also want to suggest that if Mike agrees and is amenable to adding a recommendation that we fulfill this research team at the Center for Policing Excellence, that be added. Mike may have very good reasons not to put that in this document here, and I'll certainly acquiesce to that, but just want to make sure that's part of the conversation.
That would be great.
Okay.
I mean, the research position is critical to our work with not only CPE, but the Oregon Knowledge Bank and everything else that we're doing. That fits right in.
Well, I would move that we forward the Justice Reinvestment Report to the legislature with particular emphasis on the recommendations on page 6.
It has been moved. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it. There's been some recommended additions that all those be included in the report.
Do you agree with that?
Yes. Just have a summary, if you can, of what's going to be added.
Yep. So we are going to add, with the caveat, the 2015 UCR data. We'll extend the graph from, right now it's up to 2014. We'll extend it to 2015. We'll put an asterisk in there about our concerns with the quality of that data. We will also combine both the male and the female populations into one graph so that people can get the gravity of where we were when the legislature was first taking this issue up, with facing a prison population of 16,000 by 2023. We were going to add some additional analysis around the, especially identity theft, in terms of noting that with more downward departures, of which would have been lower sentences, that could explain some of the either increase or lack of decrease to the average length of stay of those crimes, and is a contributing factor to that analysis. What else have we got, team?
I think Steve had raised something about a DOC system.
Seeking support or endorsement of the state prioritizing a new information data system for DOC.
We're going to bold and highlight and triple stamp and double stamp that funding needs to happen.
Well, then
that was the promise.
And then, yep, okay.
And Chief Teague's going to put it in iambic pentameter, I understand.
Policing excellence.
Yeah, and the CPE.
And we'll add the CPE.
And fund the CPE position.
And I believe that the chief has just some cleanup, nothing that changed the substance that he'll get with you.
That sounds good.
We did have some additional things we were going to show you to see if you wanted to include them or not. We are happy to leave that for another day, and if you are satisfied with the report in its entirety as is, we can just go forward.
Are there any additions, deletions, or changes at this point? If not, is there any objections to accepting the report as amended? None? You've got a report.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I think we are adjourned. And we will look at you if we need to come back for any addendums. And with that,
Thank you very much. Hey,
you're
Mike.
quite welcome.
Great job. Very comprehensive. And
these two
guys did, everybody did a great job on it.
So I'll send you that stuff.
He'll always get it in
containers, because it's really,
I knew that.
elevator message. We're not changing. I appreciate that.
I don't have more meetings up there, but I haven't been there.
Steve's actually doing a good job in your
Because here, it's my third day here this week in Salem.
So where I need to make a change,
That's what
right here, I can change, I suggest to add in marks. Or, like where you need a semicolon.
Okay, yeah, much appreciated.
It's marked like that. And then where I just have a question or a suggested change, I just sort of, like for example, I think it'd be better here, instead of saying will not see increased prison, better to say we have already realized all of these. So that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, that makes sense. Translate an eligible program. We had an example of one person's doing a sentence out of
I've written enough documents. I know how to do it.
Thank you very much.
All right, man.
Appreciate it.
Because of a community court 5-day consecutive sentence that was administratively impossible.
Thank you very much. Have a
Oh,
great
you're
day.
welcome. I hope so. I know I will.
I got to wait for the Sheets County. Anyway, I'll send it.
Yeah, we didn't even see this, so.
Right, it was good, yeah, I'll get that. You guys.
Thanks a lot. This works at, so Kelly's
Passos had a chance to talk to you last.
Alex talked to me about this.
You gotta worry around this too when people start taxing.
Have some conversation with Nancy Koza.
Yes, so we're talking to them, but I would hear.
Same thing.
Public defense.
We get that, so we get a refresh. It's mandates. Because at best,
So I'd like to.
whatever, Fox and you, we're the ones that are on the profile. Because if you find profiling, all you're going to do is staff. And
Yeah, we're going to dig into that.
we already do that.
Yeah.
Get a chance.
Well, mine was with Nancy had talked to me just prior to this. So I said,
Yeah. So we're gonna pursue that corrector
I think so. And I think there's some, there's just. this. So if you can take options, that's something else that maybe it's coming from the fact that
I would love for it to say, you know,
what's your
we get it, but these guys want to get to the solution.
kind of attack phrase?
And at this, at best, this doesn't even illuminate. I mean,
Dig into Washington County.
Yeah, I mean, we'll.
We can look at it
what we
within the
want,
next
we want to
It's
know
proper.
Scappoose and Kaiser to do that. And then those guys don't have the employees to untangle that. So we can run wide or some wireless.
I'm wondering if it might be better with the guys.
It's a much better solution.
I mean, not that our do we get
I'm hearing
If I circle back to
Eric,
the talk to
so I don't know where I should roll it.
Right. You know, I mean, I know because it used to be at one point it was right in November. Right. I don't know that because I think
You know, look, we're sitting at this table. There's a lot of big conversations. And users. We got the guy. That's what I was going to suggest. Data should help us.
It's kind of reverse incentive, if you will, or maybe it's not.
I think that's.
Yeah, I got to fill
Care
it.
about
Thanks for coming. Thanks for looking over.
that
I'll see you around. Okay, take care. Thanks.
Did we ever hang this up?
Yeah, could someone give us a few cents?
The limited accumulation of data does not for Scappoose, Kaiser, small. We've already got data details at the state level, Eugene, the places we're going to concern about. And our concern is that the small agencies.
Somebody's got to stand up for us.
Fair and impartial policing, which you do care about, which we care about. We're arguing the solution, not trying to identify better symptomology, which is all data.
We didn't think we should write that we're way better than ever before in our report. Somebody might.
I totally get it.
Mike might get a hard time from somebody.
I actually made a promise with the nation of
I might hurt somebody's feelings.
So we're going to have it. We're like, okay, we did it. But we at least want a reasonable conversation. And I would love if folks, you know, be possible and say, you know, we agree with the colors. It doesn't mean there's not going to happen. But
They went to that?
Yes, that's exactly what we're finding.
amongst us or?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it's like.
Although that one was Tyler. Don't even know what that is, but supposedly it can link to Carvel.
This, I don't know if this
Yeah, they did.
qualifies.
Right. But I mean, you're saying,
It
was down to them and Oracle.
They want to keep Ms. Jones
Do I want
committed to saying, let's look at
to
ours,
come
and
out
if we can, we
in a
don't even have to
position
transport it.
that's contrary to the speaker?
So it's really, I just gave Bob a quick.
But if someone asks,
Yeah.
I would love to say,
Yeah.
that's awesome.